Have you ever wondered if your team sees you as a micromanager? And this isn't just about being a hands on leader, it's a critical concern that can affect your entire organization. Imagine losing talented employees because they feel stifled. Today, we're deep diving into how you can identify whether you are a micromanager and, more importantly, how to address it so you can lead more effectively. What is micromanagement and its consequences? Micromanagement is more common than you think, and it can have disastrous effects on your team and an organization's morale. You might feel like you're being thorough, but your team might see it differently. In fact, they most likely do. Poor morale, low productivity, high turnover rates. These are just some of the issues that sprout from micromanaging behaviors, and no one wants to be micromanaged. So how do you know whether you are a micromanager? Well, first of all, and I kind of say it jokingly, if you're starting to use words when you do interviews or your one-on-ones, assuming you're doing them, I'm a very hands-on leader. I'm thorough, detail-oriented, those kinds of things. So those are watch-outs for me if I start to say that. And in fact, one of the things that I talk about when I take on a new leadership role, particularly during crisis, I actually really set the expectations around micromanagement. And I know for myself that I don't, I really struggle and strive to not micromanage, particularly under stress. So I will actually tell folks that, hey, look, you know what, under stress or under time pressure constraints, sometimes I have a tendency to micromanage. And so what does that actually look like? Well, I'll walk into the room, and if I'm the leader, I will actually think in my little hamster wheel brain that my conversation is the most important one, and what I need to know is the most important. And that's incredibly disruptive. It's disrespectful. It's demeaning and all of the things. And at the end of the day, it impedes the progress of the team meeting the mission. Now, to come to that conclusion, I've had to really, really self-reflect on that and be open about the times that I've micromanaged and been detail-oriented and all those other things. And so it's not easy, but it's critical. It's a critical self-awareness step. The irony, though, and this is a true irony of self-awareness in general, is the fact that micromanagers don't necessarily know that they're micromanaging. And it was just, again, through some really careful, objective thoughts and feedback that I arrived at that conclusion. And now let's be clear, there is sometimes some time to be very micromanagement or detail oriented. Absolutely. You're the leader, and maybe there's times to deep dive into it. But all in all, micromanagement is an absolute insidious production killer. It's a good way to tank your morale, erode respect, all sorts of things like that. And just think to yourself, do you like to be micromanaged? But again, the challenge is maybe you're a micromanager and you just don't know it. Not intentionally, but maybe you are. And that is what we're going to dive into next. So let's look objectively at our own behaviors. So think about yourself. One, constantly needing updates. Are you one that is just requiring updates from a whole bunch of people, even if it's at very quick intervals when the situation doesn't necessarily warrant it? Do you have a reluctance to delegate? And that is really, really common. If you want a job done well or done right, you got to do it yourself. Do you become really irritated when things aren't done your way? So the result may even be the same, but this is like really, really a sign. The outcome has been achieved, but how they did it maybe wasn't the way that you would do it. Or even throughout the project or task, you're constantly biting your tongue. You're like, oh man, this is driving me crazy. This is not how you do this. Do you have a feeling of anxiousness when things aren't in your control? And that could be a myriad of tasks. It could be a myriad of circumstances. Maybe you're starting to feel that anxiety or that anxiousness or that frustration, those sorts of things. So those are just some indications of a little bit of a self-check for yourself. If you're detail-oriented and you're anxious and things aren't being done the way that you want, so you're irritated with that, you need lots of updates, those sorts of things. Those are just a small sampling of what it might look like if you're a micromanager. So why does it matter? Why is it crucial to identify micromanagement in the first place? Let's stir the pot a bit. High performing employees often leave organizations where they feel micromanaged. This isn't just about you feeling in control, it's about the well being of your entire team, particularly your high performers who are exactly that. They're high performers. I'm not saying ignore everyone on your team, but of particular importance or criticality are your high performers, and they don't respond well to it, quite frankly. Every time you hover over your team members' work, you're silently signaling to them that you don't trust them. That may not even be what you're thinking, but body language, energy, all of those things, that is the message that they are potentially receiving. So think about it from the message that it sends, not just to the person you're micromanaging, but to everyone else who observes the behavior. And it reflects poorly on the individual. Like, boy, Daryl's just hovering over that person. Man, oh man, they must really be struggling. So imagine a scenario where an employee, a team member has a brilliant idea, but feels too disempowered to share it. Over time, that collective innovation in your team starts to dwindle, and it starts to lead to mediocre performance and honestly attitudes of, look, boss wants it done, they can do it themselves, or what's the point? Or I know I've said this before, if they knew how they wanted it done, then why didn't they just tell me? Instead of this BS of like, hey, you know what? It's up to you. However you want to handle it, go ahead and do it. As long as it's like A, B, C, and D. So what is the solution? Well, first and foremost, you need to identify and address that micromanagement that we talked about a little bit earlier. So again, ready to take a hard look in the mirror? Here's a step-by-step guide to identify whether you're a micromanager and how to transform your leadership style, because all is not lost here. But I have to be clear, this is not something that's easy to do. It's simple, but it's not easy. So step one, ask for feedback. Approach your team members and ask for honest feedback. And this is, I understand it. It can be awkward. It can be difficult. But if you're truly worried about supporting the team, if you're truly a servant leader, if you're really concerned about meeting the mission, it's not about your ego. It's about actually trying to improve as a leader, improve as somebody that supports others, trying to improve in the ways that you treat others with respect, all of those other things. And so a simple open-ended question is, in what ways can I improve my support for you? Are there times you feel I'm too involved? Here's the catch though, with any feedback, resist the urge to defend. Resist the urge to defend. And that is a totally natural reaction to, well, yeah, but that time, or, oh, no, that's not accurate. This isn't about you. It's about the person that you're talking to, open feedback, you're trying to get it, and it's about the mission. It's about being a better team to meet that outcome. And as they're doing it, being very aware of like the who, what, when, why, all of those other things. And you're just going to be actively listening. So when you're doing that, potentially restate. So what I'm hearing you say is, when I do that, it's perceived as micromanagement. Is that correct? And then at the end of the conversation, wrap it up and say, hey, you know what? I really appreciate your feedback here. These are the key takeaways that I've heard. Is that accurate? So it's restatement, but it's summarizing the entire conversation. Step number 2, assess your communication. So review emails and messages. Look for any patterns in your communication style. Like, remember around the updates and all those things. Do you find that you're overly directive? Do you frequently need those status updates via email or instant messenger or Teams or whatever that looks like? During meetings, are you dominating the conversation or taking over discussions? And again, these are not things that you are necessarily aware of or you're doing intentionally. That's the whole point. This is a really hard thing for individuals to self-reflect upon and be like, man, you know, maybe I am a micromanager. Because you're asking about challenges to how you do business, potentially challenges to your identity, your pride, your ego, all of those other things. But I'm here to tell you that if you can remove just even some of the barriers, just peel back a little bit of that onion, you will improve exponentially your leadership ability, your ability to connect. And here's the other thing too. Folks on your team that you support, they're not asking for perfect, but they are asking for you to give a shit. They are asking you to at least try. They'll be looking at it, and if you're intentionally trying not to interrupt them, or you're showing the frustration when tasks aren't being done the way you are, they will notice it, because guess what? They notice everything right now anyways. Step 3, set and seek objective metrics. So things like employee turnover rates. High turnover can be a real red flag, and that turnover doesn't have to necessarily be meaning leaving the company, but potentially leaving your team, or even within the team. Hey, you know what? Somebody's stepping out of a project, wanting to do something else that's maybe less involved with you, those sorts of things. And so you want to have conversations with folks, not just around the kind of tactical part around, oh, what did you like? What didn't you like? But really be specific around the micromanagement, and did they feel empowered? That's really the big question. Maybe you're not the one that's doing the interviews, because that can be incredibly awkward. I totally get it on both sides. But having that lens of, hey, you know what? Did this individual feel empowered? Did they feel like I was too involved? Did they feel like too many updates I was asking them for? Was I dominating meetings and didn't allow them to speak? Those kinds of things. Understanding our delays often due to your need to review or change something. That this has happened time and time again, where you get an email from somebody, or you ask them to send you an email or a project plan or whatever that might be. Hey, you know what? Can you fire that my way just so I can review it? Well, here's the problem, folks. You are so busy. You are so busy. You don't have time to review things in a timely fashion. And why don't you have time? Because you're getting constant updates. You need to review everything. You're not delegating, all those other things. And it actually, you become a lid. You become the bottleneck. Leader is a lid. If you're constantly needing to review things, that PowerPoint, that font, all of those other things, no one has time for that. Those are tasks that you could be delegating off. What are some more practical tips to overcome the micromanagement? Well, as I said, this is not easy. The self-reflection part is hard enough, but then what does it look like to move forward? Well, I'm a big proponent of the 1% improvement each day. So start small. Begin by delegating minor tasks and gradually move to more significant responsibilities. I don't know what that looks like, but just think about that in your context. Start small. The last thing you want to be doing is going in on a Monday morning. All right, everyone, no more micromanagement. Go do what you need to do. I'm not reviewing anything. No emails coming my way. I don't need to get updates. Life is good. Micromanagement's bad. I don't want to be that person. Got it. No, that's not what we're saying at all. Start small, incremental changes each time. And once you master that one particular part, move on to the next one. Trust your team. Believe in the competence and judgment of your employees. And if you don't, well, then honestly, maybe they're not the right team for you, or maybe they need coaching. Instead of discounting them, say, oh man, they just don't know what's going on here, or they're not able to do it. Well, is it a case of they want to, but they're unable? So they have a willingness to do it, but they don't have the resources, the training, the experience, the time, the equipment, whatever that looks like? Or is it a case of they're able to do it, but they're not willing? And that is now where you're starting to see, that's interesting. Well, one of the reasons they're able to not doing is because, you know what? F this. Daryl's going to do it. Not my problem. Look, not my problem at all. So keeping that in mind, remember, you hired them for a reason, or remember the company has hired them for a particular reason. The next one is set very clear expectations. Clearly define the outcomes and let your team decide the methods. Let your team member decide the methods, provided it's legal, ethical, moral, and falls within policy and all those other things. I talk a ton about intent. Give them the end state. Give them the task, purpose, and end state, leader's intent. Tell them what right looks like. You set the boundaries, but then let them go, and they go about their business and they feel incredibly empowered. So you want to set very clear expectations and maybe use my expectations framework. The next thing you want to do is create checkpoints, and regular checkpoints. Instead of constant oversight, set predetermined or predefined checkpoints where progress is reviewed. So maybe it's every Tuesday morning, or twice a week, or whatever that looks like, depending on maybe the pace. But being very aware that if you're setting it ahead of time, then the expectations are clear, that you are checking in at regular intervals. You're going to stay off their backs. They're also going to know that, okay, Tuesday morning is my checkpoint or my check-in. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. Even sometimes for me, it's the two questions I often, hey, what are you working on? How can I support you? You good? And I know that when I deploy I'm doing this constantly, but it's not in a micromanagement kind of way. I'm figuring out, and it depends on the person, but I'm figuring out, hey, you know what? So maybe Marnie needs a, hey, you good? Just thumbs up. Yeah, you're awesome. Good. Maybe it is that, what are you working on? How can I support you more? Or maybe it's just a look, like, you good? Whatever that looks like, you should be knowing your team and kind of what makes them tick and what motivates them and all of those other things. Develop your team, invest in the training and development, equip them with the tools and the skills they need so you can step back and let them lead. Remember, it's a case of if they're willing to but unable, well, the unable part, really dive into that. Use some active listening, use an iMessage, use whatever technique you can, and figure out what is stopping them from doing it. And therein lies part of the challenge, where their motivation is low. Again, a lot of times it's because they're sick of your crap, to be quite frank. I've been there. I've done that. Been like, you know what? What's the point of starting this thing? Because no matter what I present is not going to be what the boss wants anyways. So F it. I'm not going to put a whole bunch of time and effort into it. So you'll start to see subpar work coming your way, which means further reinforces the fact that, hey, you know what? They just don't get it. You know, they're not as good as me. No, you know what? Maybe they don't give a shit anymore. Maybe because they feel so disempowered and disrespected that they're not putting their best work forward. They're not trying. They're not motivating, all those other things. And as a leader, the onus is on you ultimately to support the team in whatever manner that team member needs. And ultimately, if you're supporting the team does better, the company does better, everyone is happier, all of those things. Employee scores go up. Boom. The benefits are many, many, many. All right. So I talked about some of the practical tips you can do. So starting small, expectations, regular checkpoints, and so on and so forth. I also talked about a little bit earlier about the team notices that you're a micromanager. Newsflash, you're probably the only one in the room that doesn't know that. And that's why this episode is important, and it requires that self-reflection, which can sometimes be hard. But maybe you've gone through and you figured out, you've checked your emails, or you realize that, oh man, you know, maybe I am a micromanager. Gosh, I need to fix that. I want to be better, right? I want to support folks better. So those practical tips for sure, but you don't want to just keep it to yourself. You want to make sure that the team knows that you're trying to improve. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, they can help you. They will probably want to help you because guess what? If you're not micromanaging, then you're empowering them. You're not breathing down their neck. It's not such a pain in the ass to be updating you all the time or sending you emails so you can wordsmith them or whatever. So it's actually in their best interest. Plus, a lot of times folks want to help. They want to be helpful, particularly if you're not a douchebag, frankly. You know, if you're a good leader and you're treating people with respect and you're trying, they will help you, but they need to know that you are trying to improve. So let them know that you're actively working to change your micromanagement style and encourage their support and input, provided it's done in a good manner. So when we talk about those checkpoints, maybe part of your checkpoint is not just about the tasks and the deadlines and those things, but hey, again, am I supporting you properly? Am I giving you the space to operate? Am I maybe giving you too much space? Because each person will have a different kind of measurement around that. And you certainly want to monitor the progress. So check in on how the changes are impacting the team dynamics. Use surveys if you have to, or casual team meetings to gather that feedback. And it's casual. It's meant to be friendly and respectful and not be a sharpshooting bitching session. And that's a whole kind of the slippery slope of any kind of feedback. But if you're truly interested in helping the team, then these are the conversations that you will have both one-on-one, but also as a team. So by now you should have a clear idea of whether micromanagement is an issue for you and some practical strategies to address it. Remember, the goal isn't just to change a habit, but to foster a more successful and ultimately harmonious workplace where people don't have a pit in their stomach when they come into work for you. I don't want that, and I don't think you do either. So take the first step today. Look in the mirror, seek that feedback, and commit to making a change. Trust me, your team will notice, and the results will speak for themselves. Thank you for tuning in. Here's to better leadership and more empowered teams. Remember, it's only about 1% incremental each day. Stay tuned for our next episode. We'll continue to drive your leadership forward and really create cultures where people are empowered, teams are high performing, all of those other things. Remember to comment and subscribe and like and leave reviews, all of those things. I would certainly appreciate it.